Hi, all. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to our WIST Presents webinar, How I Got into Sports Tech. I'm Emma Henzis, the marketing manager at WIST. Women in Sports Tech, which we call WIST, is a nonprofit organization that drives transformative growth opportunities for women from the classroom to the boardroom at the intersection of technology, sports, and innovation. WIST develops and delivers programs, original content, and a global community that provide tangible value for women and employers alike. This WISP Presents How I Got into Sports Tech webinar series provides an opportunity to learn from women and men for how to best position yourself for success in the sports tech industry at all stages of your career. This webinar is focusing on NIL tech for NCAA student athletes. I am very excited to introduce our featured guests who are shaping NIL education and technology. First, I would like to introduce Michelle Meyer, who is the founder of NIL Network. NIL Network is a platform that delivers valuable content, guidance, and resources to athletes, coaches, and administrators to guide NIL-related decisions. Michelle also serves as the NIL coordinator at San Diego State University, where she focuses on athlete education, ensuring her athletes have the tools to successfully and safely navigate NIL opportunities. Additionally, Michelle educates the San Diego community, including local businesses, supporters, fans, and alumni, about the NIL trends across the country and why partnering with student athletes for their marketing campaigns is beneficial to their company. Next, I would like to introduce Issa Hall. Issa is the founder and CEO of JRZY. JRZY is building a decentralized athlete playground called the JRZYverse, where athletes connect, engage, and monetize the opportunities they create. JRZY is an NIL compliant space for athletes automating ownership and creating new monetization opportunities using Web3 components with an overall mission of making athletes the holders of a greater market share of the revenue they generate and the primary beneficiaries of their labor and efforts. Issa is also the founder of the law firm Hall & Dixon, where his focus has shifted to the emerging NIL landscape. And last but not least, I would like to introduce Danielle Tate, who is the Senior Partnerships Manager at INFLCR. A Teamworks product, INFLCR is the leading athlete brand building and NIL business management app for elite athletic organizations. The INFLCR Athlete app educates student athletes, coaches, and staff for the NIL era in a safe and compliant environment, all powered by the best-in-class content delivery for student athletes to access and share content to their social media channels. Audience, towards the end of our time together, we will take questions from you. So please feel free to drop your questions in the chat box and we will answer them at the end. Let's get started. So first question, we want to go back and hear your early career days before the pivotal moment for college athletes across the United States, the passing of the NIL law on July 1st of 2021. How did you get into the sports tech industry? And what was your career journey leading up to being involved with NIL? Michelle, would you like to start?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Emma. I'm excited for this panel. So to share a little bit about my history and my career path, I guess. My whole career has been in volleyball. So my background's in coaching. I played collegiately at UC Santa Barbara, professionally for a year in Denmark before starting coaching beach volleyball, and actually got my foot in the door as assistant coach at University of Hawaii back in 2012, right when beach volleyball was really starting as a NCAA sport. So working very much in collegiate athletics, worked at Pepperdine University as well with the volleyball program, and then USA Volleyball for a number of years for athletes age 12 all the way up through our collegiate development program, so athletes up to 25 years old. What really got me interested in the NIL space, I was coaching at Hawaii when the Ed O'Bannon case got settled, and there was a settlement where a lot of the athletes, EA Sports was using the likeness. They got $1,000, I think, to $5,000, and I was like, man, this is so much more in the public attention now. This is definitely going to come to collegiate athletics eventually. Fast forward to fall of 2019 when California passed SB 206, which was the NIL bill for the state of California that said by January 2023, regardless of what the NCAA bylaws said, that athletes competing in California would be able to monetize their name, image, and likeness. That's the point that I really started studying and saying, okay, this is right around the corner. I never really understood. I don't have a background in law, so I didn't understand that a state could, stand up to the NCAA and make this happen, and started following it pretty closely for the next year to the fall of 2020, where all these deadlines were coming in 2021, and there wasn't really a lot of resources available for people to go to understand these changes that were coming to collegiate sports. So I founded NIL Network really to try to pull together the resources that were available and to start writing about it and talking to all of these new companies and whatnot that were entering the space. So been in it now for about a year and a half and started at San Diego State about 6 months ago, just really to build their program. So that's a bit my story.
Thanks for sharing, Michelle. Issa, would you like to go next?
Yes, absolutely. And thanks you all for having me. And to jump into it, I had a background in law, and so something that was always like the thorn in my side was seeing how NCAA athletes and collegiate athletes weren't benefiting directly, and especially with NIL, like it didn't exist then. And the way we always looked at it was that this is actually a right that we all possess, but it's actually stripped from you once you enter and agree to play these sports. And understanding, you think about it from, how much, money is generated, and understanding like the communities a lot of these kids come from. I was a practice player on the women's basketball team at UNC Charlotte. And, I recall going to, seeing, dorms and seeing people, making all this money, and then they're living, borderline poverty. Okay. And that's something, that, as the gears start turning, especially, we mentioned, get into the legal component of it and understanding like when we're negotiating, the negotiations are just chess. And something that, I quickly understood was that, athletes actually don't have their chess pieces on the board. They're actually been told what they can and cannot do, instead of being able to visualize them and understanding, hey, you can activate certain things, especially in the NIL landscape. So we started with basically just providing some type of leverage for athletes to be able to understand what opportunities exist out there for them. NIL happened. It was great for us because then we didn't have to, worry about the courtroom and the, difficult part of actually, enacting and enforcing it. And then, being able to apply, what we're building to giving athletes the ability to just, make the most of it themselves. So that's really what brought us to it. Just, trying to solve the general problem of removing, exploitation and putting people in the position to succeed.
Thank you for sharing, Issa. Danielle, would you please let us know how you got to where you are right now?
Absolutely. I'll round this out. So I started my career journey in sports at LSU. So that's where I went to school at. And that's where I started in the game and event management department. So running all of the operations for all of the sports over my time. But after that, I did some quick stints with Bruno Event Team, which is an event marketing team here in Birmingham. I also worked a little bit as a graduate assistant at the University of Kentucky, and then also a championships assistant at the Southwestern Athletic Conference. And so I was in game and event operations that whole entire time. I figured that it wasn't going to be super sustainable for the life and, the family that I wanted to build. So I was looking for another avenue where I could still work in sports, but not necessarily as strenuous as being in game and event management. And so around early 2019 was when I started hearing about INFLCR, their Birmingham-based company. And so I connected with the CEO, Jim Cavall, on LinkedIn, actually. And so from there, I was hired and I worked in the client success department. And so that was pretty much all of the clients that we were signing. So you need someone to manage those, helping them get onboarded, helping them to engage their athletes in this new product that, a majority of them have never even had before. And at the time we were specializing in content delivery. So the photos and videos that the department would be taking of the athletes, giving them a streamlined way to disseminate that to the student athletes, and giving the student athletes a fun way to get that content and be able to use it to share it to their friends and family, post it on social media. And like Michelle mentioned, the whole idea behind this was because we knew that NIL was going to be coming, and it was going to be coming sooner than a lot of us thought that it was. So we wanted to make sure that our student athletes had the tools to build their brand the way that they wanted to. So that way, eventually, whenever this happened, that they would be equipped and know how to do that. And so up until pretty much June 30th, that was my job. And then I know we'll get into this next, but once July 1st of 2021 happened, that was when my role completely switched and we went straight into NIL mode.
Thank you, Danielle. Well, actually, I'll toss the first question about this to you. Can you tell us what you do now and the impact you make on NIL technology?
Yeah, so right now, as you mentioned before, I'm Senior Partnerships Manager at INFLCR. So once July 1st came over, I was actually one of the ladders. We had already had the partnerships division created for this specific purpose. So there was already team members there that were, boots on the ground already running away with this. But when I came over, already having the relationships with the schools, relationships with the athletes. And then now what we're going to do is bring these partners into the influencer app to help our athletes navigate NIL in this huge space that it is. Obviously, majority of them had no idea that it was even coming. Some of them didn't even know that they were able to make money for the first couple months. They were like, what are you talking about? So it was really fun to be able to find different partners that we wanted to integrate within influencer, just to give the athletes an idea of the things that they could be doing in order to make money. So whether that was merchandise or camps or marketplaces, different things like that, where we'd be able to give those opportunities and showing our student athletes what that's like. And then my specific role was to help bridge that. So I would work with those companies to help strive some engagement with the athletes and helping them to formulate plans and their NIL strategies. And then also, again, with the student athletes, educating them about our different partners, and not even just the partners, but all the different ways that they can start making money with NIL. Because again, it was so very new. We just wanted to make sure that now that we solidified our approach to how we're going to navigate this space, making sure that everyone's educated and knowing it.
Absolutely. Well, Michelle, so you are working in two spaces in NIL. So would you like to share both of what you're doing at the network and at San Diego State?
Yeah, so as Danielle mentioned, I feel like so much of this whole industry right now comes down to education, and it's not even just on the athlete side, as Danielle mentioned, it's so much on the brand side and business side, and really trying to connect the dots. So while I'm technically working two jobs right now at NIL Network and San Diego State, they actually are pretty intertwined, because with NIL Network, I'm trying to build those resources to help, there's however many, 350, let's say, D1 institutions out there. And I think that a lot of them are kind of taking a wait and see approach, or not really comfortable making a lot of decisions right now. So it's like, how can we help them help their athletes, even if they don't have a budget for it yet? And that's kind of the content I'm trying to develop on the NIL Network side. And then within San Diego State, I sit in student athlete development and academics, and so really make myself available to the athletes. They can book in like 30-minute sessions with me from everything. Come in, I want to get set up on the various platforms, to exploring a specific opportunity, to even what are my opportunities, because again, it's getting their wheels turning of like, it doesn't have to be just a social media post or endorsement. There are a plethora of other ways that you can engage in this space, but then also getting out into the community and making sure that local businesses who may have never even thought of dabbling in this industry before, if they're doing their marketing campaigns, to talk about what does that look like? What are the different things that have happened around the country with businesses like yours? How can you even find the student athletes of San Diego State? Because I think, and I know Danielle and at Influencer, but there was a lot of the marketplaces that came out on July 1st that were for national brands and all athletes from around the country. And it's that model didn't work as well as niching down and saying, okay, we're here to connect the local businesses and fans. And that's probably going to be the majority of these NIL opportunities in time, once the local businesses kind of figure out how to engage with the athletes. So everything I'm doing, I guess, is just education and development of resources and tools for everyone.
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing. Issa, please tell us more about what you're doing at JRZY and the JRZYverse and the legal side.
Well, I have to co-sign exactly what Danielle and Michelle said as far as the education is like. We noticed very early on with JRZY, and we started JRZYversity literally a month ago, because the main thing was just questions about the how and understanding, especially in the NIL market, of people who can generate revenue, like these, top level athletes who are getting things like sponsorships. They will always have people readily available to help them. But athletes who are maybe getting smaller deals, or who just want or interested in entering the arena, they actually need assistance understanding how they can navigate this, because it's capitalism, right? Like, the people they're dealing with are trying to make money. You have lawyers who will write contracts. This is stuff I know because I've done it before, completely in the favor of the other party, understanding your company expecting the other party to have their attorney redline it and go back and say, hey, this is how we're going to balance this thing out. And so, athletes have to understand when we're entering this, hey, you do have to read this, because they are trying to make money or do something to their benefit. And you cannot rely on other people to, look out for your best interest, because technically the way these things are written and they're conducted have to be solely focused on the person who's issuing this contract to you. And so the educational component was one of the first things. And then with JRZY, again, it's the fact that, opportunities, they kind of trickle down. So when NIL launched, I think a lot of, athletes, expected a lot more because of what we're seeing of, like people are getting endorsements and sponsorships, but it still applies to, what we're actually doing right now. So if I am not someone who is getting a sponsorship or has a large social media following, this should not be something that the space should be projecting to me that I should expect. And so the educational component about expectations and understanding, hey, smaller companies or even things like group, leverage and kind of combining resources are ways for athletes to actually activate these things on their own. But there's this whole educational component of like, hey, we can create technology, we can present things, but there has to be a way to connect, and educate the athletes and the people into how they can actually activate. And so, that's where we focus a lot of our recent energy on the educational component, because you can build the, greatest technology, app in the world, but at the same time, if you can't teach people how to use it, or, when we're talking about NIL and what we're doing is a lot of Web3 stuff, we're like, hey, actually people have a lot more questions than ability to actually pick it up and use it. So, we have to slow down and actually, teach and educate and make sure they know what to look out for. And then people will readily and happily pick it up and start using it. So I have to really co-sign like where our, current focus is on educating and making sure that, we're protecting the rights of athletes, people who we are, here to protect and serve, meaning like, I made this, platform for you. Let's make sure that it's actually serving your best interests at all time. And so, that's, I have to mirror exactly that. The education component is huge.
Yeah, Issa, that's a great point. And that was kind of on my next question is, would you be able to dig a little bit more into the tech that you're doing and explain a little bit of how Web3 is going to play and shape the world of NIL?
Yes, absolutely. And so, Web3 is almost synonymous with, decentralization and like ownership and understanding that this is just how the space is shifting. And Web3, a lot of people are very familiar with cryptocurrencies and NFTs. But NFTs are something that, a lot of people can activate and almost sell on a one-to-one basis. We look at, Web3 presenting where the former model may say, hey, you might need, a lot of followers on some platform in order to even approach having some type of deal or opportunity to make money. Web3 is really identifying ownership as being the primary focus of how athletes can activate their NIL. I think that, one thing that kind of goes missing in the public narrative is the fact that like, hey, you weren't able to start businesses before using your name, image, likeness. You couldn't even start a t-shirt shop. Instead of, looking outward or trying to, approach an opportunity that may be outside of your reach, you can actually start activating these things basically at the height of your careers right now. And so one thing that, we have built that we believe is important is just technology that like visualizes these things, visualizes your leverage, visualizes and simulates, what potential opportunities exist for you personally. And if you can't get this opportunity, how can you, manipulate or combine your resources in order to approach these things? Because that's the, the transparency of just having, this playground of, chess pieces and understanding, how this space works. And so, that's the foundation of, what we're putting together is saying, hey, on a one-to-one basis, athletes, yes, they're ownership opportunities, especially using Web3, that you can activate individually on your own. And yes, we're putting together the tools to help automate it, but there are ways that you can start to monetize and activate things independent of sponsorships and on your own to take advantage of this NIL space too, because it's not a one size fits all. The stars will continue to get the big bucks, but there are plenty of opportunities for individuals who are, influencers is not for every, and I know that's a company name too, but like being an influencer, so not necessarily, but it's like being an influencer is not everybody's thing. And so like for me, I'm like, if I like to fish or I like to cook and I have a small following, there's a way for me to monetize and activate things that I'm truly interested in, using either Web3 or just using, more connections and information in the space, as opposed to, the one size fits all, like, path of really the rich get richer element that is, exists in professional sports. And the same thing is what happens in these sports. Like, everybody's gonna get $1 million deal, but there are plenty of ways for these things to be activated. So, that's really what we're focusing on.
Really cool. I think everyone's really excited to hear about the accessibility and give space to athletes who might not otherwise be recognized in this area. So I think that's a wonderful thing, and especially for women's sports, because historically women's sports have not had the opportunities that men's sports have. So I think NIL is a really interesting opportunity for that. But Danielle, I was wondering if, from your perspective at Influencer, who are the key stakeholders in NIL, and how are you building that technology to their ever-changing needs?
Yeah, so with the key stakeholders, you've really got to think that it's everyone that's involved with this, from the athletes to the companies to the schools themselves. So, starting out with the athletes, they're the ones, obviously, this affects them directly. This is their name, image, and likeness. They're the ones that are making this money. So obviously, you would think that they would be the most or have the most leverage or have the most key stakeholders in this. And so we wanted to make sure that our app specifically that, helped them to do whatever they wanted to do. So that was a really big component of us of, hey, they've already gone to Influencer for getting their photos and videos after their games and practices and things like that. What else can we do now that we know that we're already getting them into the app to help them on this side of things? But then when you talk about the companies, like, okay, well, the athletes are here. They're obviously not paying themselves, so they've got to get the money from somewhere. So that's where the companies come in. And that's where you also consider them to be huge stakeholders in this, because they're the ones that are providing the funds for athletes that they haven't been able to tap into before. And this is just a whole new sector for all of them as well, because you think about athletes where we're following more athletes than we're following the teams that they're on. We're following athletes and we're fans of athletes now instead of fans of the teams that they're a part of. So making sure that they're connecting with them in that way is huge. And then also, again, with the schools, because everyone wants to be part of that group that has the money or knows where the money is going to. And so, obviously you can say that some schools are making more money than others, or some athletes at some schools are making more money than those other athletes at other schools. But all in all, everyone wants to be on that competitive playing field. And so they want to make sure that although they can't completely interfere with NIL and the transactions that are happening, they still want to be able to set up their athletes to be successful in the best way possible, because that just rounds out their university. You can come and play for us. You can build whatever brand it is that you want to build, and then you can continue to have our name attached to you as you go into your professional career or your work environment or whatever the case may be, but making sure that their name is still tied to that athlete, knowing that they did all they could for that athlete. So I really think it's all three of them.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. And I think that is an interesting component of, after 4 years, their career is done, and then in the athletic space, but they can continue on the skills they've learned, what they've developed. Michelle, I would like everyone to answer this question, but Michelle, I'll start with you, since your day-to-day is with the student athletes. We've talked about it a little bit, but what are the biggest struggles for student athletes, and how are you addressing these issues and finding solutions to overcome these challenges?
Yeah, I would say probably the most scheduled meeting with me is just, how do I even get started, right? Like, they kind of, this was illegal for their whole career. July 1st came, they see all the headlines of this kid gets a car, this kid gets $1 million. And a lot of them are going, well, crap, like, I don't have, 100,000 followers, or NIL is not for me, or I don't want to be a social media influencer, like Issa said. So what are my opportunities? I know I'm probably not going to make this life-changing money, but even a couple $100 here and there can be really helpful for my day-to-day life. And so a lot of athletes come in and, we sit down and go through some of the various platforms and ways that they can look to monetize. But I think one of the issues that I'm trying to address right now, and I think that actually Influencer has done a really nice job with this. I haven't seen the Influencer local exchange, but this is what I kind of imagine it looks like, is it solves the issue of a lot of these national platforms or marketplaces. Like I mentioned before, athletes signed up from all over the country to be on them. Each individual one, there's probably 30 of them across the country, have each a couple thousand athletes and 1,000 brands or whatnot that are looking to make deals. But the athletes have made now profiles on these platforms, and then there's nothing else proactive that they can do to get NIL opportunities. They're kind of sitting there waiting for the brand to reach out to them, which for the majority of athletes that are outside of that celebrity type status with the 100 million followers or whatnot, like it's hard to differentiate themselves from other athletes around the country. And so for the ones that really want these opportunities, how can they reach out to brands? How can they stand out? How can they get local opportunities? And again, I think that comes back a lot to my role as well, to say, to get out into the community and talk to local businesses and get them actually up to speed with what's going on in this industry. And then I can point them. I can't facilitate these NIL opportunities as an employee of the university, but I can educate them and say, hey, here at San Diego State, we use student athlete empowerment. And then we have like our open doors directory where they can go and make these type of opportunities for athletes. But the problem I'm really trying to solve right now is outside of those two platforms and what I can do at the local level, how can they be proactive on all these other marketplaces, should they want to be? Because again, when you look at every institution, maybe 10 to 20% of the student athletes of their whole student body are participating in NIL opportunities at all. So it's small right now. I do think that number is going to continue to grow. But if you look at 10 to 20% out of 450,000 NCAA athletes, that's a lot of athletes who are looking for now these NIL opportunities. So I think we're still just scratching the surface of what it can look like. But again, I hate to be a broken record, but it all comes back to education on all sides.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Danielle, would you like to share? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so Michelle, it's funny that you mentioned that, because even before we implemented local exchange, and which is one of the product offerings that we have with Influencer, but and kind of where the inception came from was because, you've got the huge people that, you don't necessarily have to worry about how they're going to make their money or where, the brands will come to them. They can choose whatever avenue they want to. But for the mass majority of the student athletes, and you want to make sure that you have a way for them to connect with places that are local to the university, because those are ones that they're going to be the most visible. And, they see that campaign or whatever they're doing, and they know who that student athlete is, and they can go and see them just on a weekday, let alone like a weekend or anything like that. So that was one thing that I was even preaching before to some of our non-Power 5 schools, was just the fact that, hey, like, go to your local businesses, because they love you. They already support you in this way because you're already in their community. Like, go out there and see what they can give, because like Michelle mentioned, and like we've all continuously said, the education of it is just not there. And it's just because it's so new, but making sure that they're creative in the opportunities that they get. I think the biggest struggle for me, just to add on to this, is that there's a belief that there's not a lane or avenue for every single student athlete out there. And that's completely untrue. Social media, when we talk about technology, is such a huge component in the way that people are doing activations and social campaigns. And that's great. But then you see that, and then you're another student athlete at a different university, and you're like, well, I can't be that, or I don't want to be that, but I still want to be able to make money. So knowing that there's different lanes depending on what exactly you want to do. Issa mentioned it before, if I'm into hunting and fishing, then I could do a endorsement deal with a hunting and fishing company, but if I don't reach out to them, then how will they know that I'm in the hunting and fishing? Well, I got to post it on my social media. So, it's like this continuous cycle of who's supposed to reach out first or what's supposed to happen first, but just making sure that everyone knows that, hey, like, you might not be making $15,000 off of one single deal, but you could still make $15,000 from a multitude of different deals versus, not being at someone else's pay range just because you're such an elite athlete. We love elite athletes. We're so proud of them, obviously. And, we're glad that they're got such a high status, but at the same time, there's so many more student athletes that have different opportunities available to them. And we just got to make sure that they know where they're at.
Absolutely. Thank you. Issa, do you want to share what you find is the biggest struggle for student athletes, but also the biggest challenge in the NIL space and how you're addressing this?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you. I think one part of this, and it's kind of a little additional to it, but it's like the mental health component. When we saw this big wave of, the floodgates were just unleashed and everyone's trying to get something. And my feeling and impression of the space was that it was actually causing more stress to especially the students who were not getting opportunities presented to them. Because, we are going to play like on a social media stage, especially we're seeing what other people are doing and we're that's, affecting how we feel about ourselves or how we feel about the space in general. And so that has been one of the biggest, because there's, optimism and then there's like, skepticism, like, well, maybe this isn't for me. And so that has been a challenge of, when people have actually signed up for things and, it didn't necessarily work out for them, but understanding like, hey, these are also very busy student athletes who don't have the time to just, press play and then something not work and then keep doing that. Because, again, they're extremely busy, but the information component and then the having something that's actually just versatile, the versatility of understanding how we can create better matches and create alternative methods for, these student athletes to actually make money. And especially, and I saw a comment about like, international students and how, Michelle mentioned how, you can sign up for something, but then what else do you do? And 99% of athletes are probably, and this is not just a NIL thing, but globally, this is just a very small sliver in a very short period of time of an opportunity. And, these, athletes are doing things, amateurs, professional, retired, and understanding, hey, how can we solve other additional problems within this NIL space, but also present opportunities for athletes to, connect or start to build on opportunities, whether it's, not even just an internship, but there are so many versatile ways to actually activate NIL. There are plenty of companies, giving out things like equity or, internships. So there's a huge component of just networking that is something that we're really focusing on. But it's like, how can you provide value outside of sponsorships or endorsements so that you can actually draw people back in so they are confident enough to understand that there's plenty of opportunities out there. And so, that's something that has been a struggle. But I think, just as Michelle said, as it's, a very small percentage of athletes, but it's going to grow. And I think once, like the marketplaces and once the space clears and the dust settles a little bit, and information is even shared with athletes, I think that is how we'll begin to grow and get past some of the initial struggles. Because my impression was that the expectations that people were, a lot of people I think thought they were just gonna, jump in and somebody's just gonna offer them a deal, and not understanding you do have to be either proactive or you have to be in a position to make these companies money. Like they're not here to give away money, and understanding like, hey, let's temper expectations, let's educate and offer different avenues and channels for people to actually activate their NIL and understand like, hey, you can go start a podcast. You can start practicing while you're in undergrad instead of having to skip this 4 years in your prime, like where you're going to be on national television. You're going to build so many connections. I'm like, hey, this is your window where you can actually start this, as a business that's, starting. After that, you don't get these opportunities again where you can start it where you're most visible, you're making all your connections. And that's really the biggest benefit of NIL that we're trying to, make sure that narrative is always spoken. Like, hey, ownership, you don't have to always, put all your eggs in the sponsorship basket and go outside of your comfort zone. This is actually where you can do it, and you can take your hobby and start making money off of it. That is like the biggest deal that I cannot say enough. Like, take your hobby, make money. You couldn't do that before, and take advantage of your opportunities.
Thank you for sharing that, Issa. I think you brought up a great point about networking too. My brother is a football coach at Boston College. And when I was talking to him about what they're doing for NIL, they said a lot of things they really want to focus on is getting kids jobs after college and focus on their student athletes being able to make the networking connections. And so that's how they're really trying to get NIL opportunities, is saying, maybe we'll strengthen this connection for you and you have a job after college. And that's kind of the way they're looking at NIL. And it's just beginning. So as you have all mentioned, the opportunities are just starting. There's a lot to grow, but I think that's really useful because, as we know, most student athletes, they don't go pro. And so they need another avenue after college, which I think is a really unique spotlight to NIL. But let's talk a little bit about the biggest wins and losses of athletes since NIL has been approved. Are there any really big success stories or stories that other student athletes can learn from? Michelle, I'll start with you. And it doesn't have to just be at San Diego State, but just things that you've seen throughout this time.
Yeah, so I think, coming from my coaching background, like the first thing I thought of when NIL passed was back to my previous rosters and like the athletes I thought could really benefit from NIL and take advantage of it. And again, being a coach, what I was most excited about, which I'm very excited to see this summer, is coaching opportunities. So coaching clinics, coaching private lessons. I've seen a couple athletes across the country, who jumped right on it last summer, but really they didn't have the opportunity or the time to plan out what a camp or clinic could look like. But I think there's so many community engagement pieces, like even if it's mentorship or appearances at a local club, your Boys and Girls Club, running camps and clinics, and things that tie back then to, even the growth of their team and their program, because they go out and coach, let's say a soccer clinic on a Sunday afternoon with 10-year-olds. All those kids are going to love this athlete now and be like, Mom, can I go to the SDSU women's soccer game or whatnot? And so I think that those are really cool opportunities, and also building the brand and like the following of the athlete. So I was really excited about those opportunities. I think some of the unfortunate things we saw were really out the gates on July 1st with just bad contracts, or athletes, getting this FOMO kind of fear of missing out and going, okay, I want to jump on this opportunity as well because I see my teammates doing it. And then we start to uncover later, like, I'll throw this out here, like the Barstool athlete opportunity, right? Like, not necessarily inherently bad. I mean, I think that, it depends on your vision of the brand and whatnot, but I think a lot of athletes who jumped onto that, it was a FOMO thing. They jump on, they put Barstool athlete into their Instagram profile. And what the athletes didn't necessarily consider is, hey, like this could be prohibiting other opportunities, because if a brand is interested in working with me, they come to my profile and it says Barstool athlete, and this brand doesn't want to be affiliated with Barstool athlete. Guess what? They're probably not going to offer that NIL opportunity and that partnership connection there. So having athletes realize that it's not like a siloed box of NIL opportunities, everything that they do is on a continuum, and that like it goes with your personal brand as well. This follows you. And so to be a lot more, I guess, cognizant around what deals you're doing, what deals you're taking, and the brands that are associated with it, make sure that it falls into, what your beliefs and your values are.
Absolutely. I saw everyone when Michelle mentioned Barstool athlete. Everyone had some reactions to that. And Danielle, I would just love to hear, big wins and losses that you've seen, and kind of the big wins for tech as well as NIL tech, in your opinion, during this course.
Yeah, I'll say wins for me would have to be athletes foregoing the draft because they're able to make money. We've seen that especially over the past week with a couple different basketball players that have announced that they're staying. And, that's always been a sensitive subject for a lot of people, but I think we can all agree that for the most of them, the reason why they would forego their playing eligibility years and go pro was because of the money. So now with them being able to actually make money in college and they can stay and get their own degree, it's allowed them to have a little bit more flexibility in terms of what they want to do and not just automatically want to leave just because of the money. Losses for me, and Michelle, I thought this is actually what you were going to say at first, but one loss for me especially is just having coaches that are vocalizing their disdain with NIL. I think it's kind of unfortunate that with something that has been looming for so long, and which is pretty much like overall been a good thing for student athletes. It's like, hey, if you want to take part in it, you can and make money. If you don't want anything to do with it, you don't necessarily have to. But I think that it's hurt a lot of athletes knowing that they have a coach that maybe doesn't like the system or doesn't like the way that it's going. And the last thing you want to do is always stifle them and, making them feel like this is such a bad thing when in reality, it doesn't have to be. And in terms of tech, I think it's been really cool just to see the evolution of some things. And it's funny because when we talk about tech too, like we can't ignore the fact that COVID-19 also implemented a lot of tech as well. So it kind of went hand in hand. One of the partners that we actually just recently partnered with and announced, JRZY, they have something that's really cool where you're able to do virtual autograph signings, which I thought was just so clever because, we hear student athletes, and I was actually talking with a couple of them before, where they're going through a line and they're constantly just signing a poster. They're not even looking up at whoever they're signing the autograph for. And it's so hard to engage with them. But instead, what JRZY is doing is creating virtual queues where you'll get a set amount of time in an environment just like this, where you're able to be one-on-one with the person, sign something electronically for them, and actually get to know them. And the best part for me is that these people can be from around the world. So you can be doing it in your dorm, but it can be people from your hometown that are like coming in and signing up and buying tickets for this. So I think tech all around has just been so cool, but especially with everything else, not just in our industry, but around the like every industry going tech, it's been really cool just to see everything kind of intertwine in.
That is some really cool tech. Issa, what about you? And I would love to also hear not just what you think the big wins and losses for student athletes were for themselves and for the tech world, but also with your legal background, kind of what are the wins and losses there?
So the biggest win was just the fact that, NIL rights are like reinstated without it having to go through this long drawn out process of the courts. And that was just, that's not necessarily something that like a 4-year window gives you time to actually, count on. But so that for me, it's just like, that's a huge one for athletes, period, without having to, go even further into it. The losses are I can mirror just like either predatory practices, in general. And there are, I don't want to call them bad players. They are playing the same game that they're used to playing. It's just that athletes are and they're students. Like these are, 18, then you go 19 and understanding like this is a completely different game that we are entering, and understanding that there are people whose interests will not align with your, personal interests. They're only going to be on there. So that part, especially legally and, understanding that there are a lot of, things out there that probably do require, the input of an attorney or someone advising people like, hey, this is something you need access to. But, I'll say a loss. I don't want to say, but it's more like, listen, the schools, I would hope, take advantage and understand that putting athletes in the position and using this to your advantage. What Danielle said with the coaches, like, this is an opportunity for you to do good for these athletes that, all of you are getting rich off of. Therefore, use it to your advantage the same way that you're using it to your advantage personally, right? Because I think there's just so much, opportunity out there. So I would love to see more, schools embrace it, where, like, hey, put your athletes, on a pedestal, like put their, QR codes on their jerseys, like promote them, because this is actually going to make you look great for, these recruits. Is going to bring excitement to your organizations. Is something that like every school can do. And I feel like the ones who don't do it will, or the ones who begin doing it will have a leg up. And so, those are some of the things that, I hope to turn into a win for athletes, long term. But right now, yes, we are seeing the resistance of the old guard, trying to, hold on to, there's a huge pot of money that people don't want to share, but still, like, it's changed. It's over. Let's, use it to our advantage. I think that's what I hope to see. And we're seeing, new coaches, say, hey, it's a new game now. So we're going to take advantage of this. And obviously, I haven't seen any athletes complaining about getting money. I don't think anybody up here would complain about that. Like it's, you know what I mean? Like, hey, like, let's enjoy what we want to enjoy ourselves and allow everyone else to enjoy the fruits of the labor too. So, that's what I hope to continue to see more of.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And speaking of a new game, this was a question I had for you all. I'm going to open up questions for the audience so that way we can get to everyone's questions. But were you surprised to see that Mark Emmert is stepping away as the president of the NCAA? This question's from Mary Lou. Would this bode well, you think, for a potential sea change of NCAA policies and control over the ecosystem? I know we talked a little bit about before we even started recording, and I'm sure you all have your own opinions. So I will leave the floor open for anyone who wants to answer this question if change is coming.
I kind of want Michelle to answer this because she's the one that's on campus, but at the same time, I'm like, no, we probably should protect her because she's on campus.
Well, I mean, I think, that news broke yesterday, and of course there's been Twitter storms going around with everyone's kind of opinion about it. But overall, I mean, if you've been tracking kind of what has been going on in the NCAA, I'd say for close to the last decade or so, it really needs a massive kind of overhaul to be sustainable. Like they cannot keep having these hundreds of millions of dollars of lawsuits every time that they change a rule. Like they need to be a better leader in the space. And I know it's like with the way, at least, how I, envision it with the overall structure of what it looks like right now, it's really, really hard to make the changes that need to be made. So whoever that new leader is in there, whoever that president is, I mean, they are going to have a really, really difficult job and probably going to make some hard decisions. And I imagine are going to get a ton of pushback to write kind of this course. But we'll see. TBD.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate you sharing with us too. And I'm going to try to get to as many audience questions as I can. Some people are interested in hearing what's the rough number of athletes you've come across who have represented themselves without an agent, and was this successful? And I think that there's probably a few differing opinions if needing agents involved. And Danielle, would you like to take this question? And athletes who have been represented without agents, success, how does that, what do you think?
So I would probably say about, from what I've seen, it's pretty much about at least 90% of them do not have an agent. Like most of them can't necessarily afford an agent because they do have to take their percentage or their cut. And we like to tell our athletes, like there's some instances and there's some athletes that, you know, representation is probably good for you because you need someone to help manage everything that's coming in and out. But for the rest of our athletes, you probably just don't have that volume, at least not yet, to need to have representation in that manner. But what we will say is that you do need people in your corner to help you navigate the stuff like Issa's been mentioning with contracts and negotiations and things like that. If you're not familiar with those, you definitely need someone to help read over those with you, even if it's just someone to, hey, I've read this contract already, but I need my parent to help me reread this just to make sure that everything's okay. And one thing that we kind of alluded to before, but I think a lot of this comes from, and our student athletes have actually said this before, where, hey, if you get hurt, you have a trainer that's on staff. If you need to figure out what to eat, you probably got a nutritionist on staff. You know, like you've already had all of these things on your campus for you specifically to use. Well, now we're in NIL and you don't have anybody to help you. And not because they don't want to, but because legally they're supposed to not be allowed to. So it's been really hard for them to try to navigate and try to get advice because the people that they trust on campus can't tell them yes or no, this is a good deal or it's not. So just making sure that they have those people in their corner that they can trust to at least read over contracts and to help them financially, whether that's a parent or if they do have to get external representation for that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Danielle. And I'll take one more question from the audience. So a question from Jennifer. Can the panel discuss what they see on the horizon with EA Sports and how that will pull athletes, their schools, and video game publishers into the same agreement? Issa, would you like to take this question about esports and where you see that going?
You know, I'll go this direction. I'm not sure if it's going to answer directly, but it goes into this group licensing and this this collective type of bargaining element that has been completely missing from like the NCAA environment. Okay, and we see it more so along the lines of like in professional sports, they all have some type of component of this, and this is why these things are so critical to this space. And so as far as what I am seeing, because now you're looking at this huge pool of money that is now going to exist with these NCAA, there are EA Sports games, and there's going to be some type of tug of war into that pot of money as well. But I look at it as that is probably when we start talking about a group licensing the entire entity, we are probably going to see some type of measure that allows the rights of athletes to be able to actively participate and navigate that too, because again, this is a very big company with a whole lot of money, and so I do hope that athletes are able to benefit from that fully. But that is just what I see on the horizon, because the individuals are not going to be able to. It's not going to be something that they can do like that.
Absolutely, that's a great point. That really opens up a whole can of worms of how you make sure that everyone's fairly compensated for that in a world where they never had to previous. Give them what they deserve for their name, image, and likeness. I will, one more question, since thank you to the audience for being so engaged, and we are running out of time, but I'll give one more question. Tracy asked, She's curious where Michelle reports to at San Diego State, and if Danielle and Issa can share who they're working with on campuses to create these partnerships within athletics, marketing, career services, corporate partnerships, development, alumni relations. And she just welcomes any advice for being an accessible partner. I think a lot of people will be interested to hear a little bit of the inside. Michelle, I'll let you start with that on the inside.
Yeah, so it's been really interesting. So at San Diego State, I'm technically in the compliance department. I've met with most of the other kind of NIL delegates across the country, and it's kind of a wild space right now in terms of what department they fall under. There's some in student athlete development, there's some in sports media, there's some in the marketing department. So it's really all over the map right now. And I think that, you know, a very cool thing that I'm trying to do at San Diego State that some other schools have done is really connecting with our with our university. So we have a fantastic business school here. What can we build to help our athletes, you know, with the entrepreneurship side of things? Oklahoma State is doing a great initiative with their marketing school where they are matching, you know, athletes one-on-one, and the marketing student is working on putting together a marketing plan for the athlete to help them with their brand and whatnot. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities, especially considering it's such a new industry, and the students who are in college right now studying sports management, sports law and whatnot, they all kind of see the writing on the wall that this is going to be potentially an opportunity for their career after they graduate out. So they're trying to get involved, get as much information as they can. And really under that NIL industry, it is a vast landscape because it's covering everything from, you know, your tax accountants and your attorneys to brand building and marketing. And so there's so much space and room, I guess, for developments also in there. So I'm really trying to integrate a little bit more with our school and have our athletes have access to those resources as well.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. Well, would everyone please like to share their socials personally or the company you're representing? You can share how people can get in contact with you or keep up to date on the technology you're working with. So Issa, you can go first and we'll go around. Danielle and Michelle, please share you know, any final words as well.
Hey, I appreciate everybody, you know, just being here. We can talk on the stuff that we love. At Issa Hall, at JRZY is probably where we are on social media. Again, my name is Issa Hall. It's pretty easy to find me. I wish I was more active, not very active on social media, but JRZY is a good way to keep in touch with us and kind of stay aware of, you know, what our movements are. But I appreciate you all for hosting it and having me on this panel.
Glad to have you. Danielle?
Yeah, so like Issa mentioned, thank you guys so much for this opportunity. Thank you guys to also that are the attendees. You guys asked great questions, so I'm sorry that we couldn't get to all of them, but for me personally, Twitter is probably the best way to reach out to me. It's at Danielle J. Tate. If you find me on there, if Instagram is also your jam, you can find me on there too. You can just search Danielle Tate. But then also for influencer, I will type it in the chat, but it's at INFLCR. And then I know that WIS also tags me in a couple posts on LinkedIn as well. So if you guys want to connect with me on there, definitely find me because I know that there's not a great way to say your username on LinkedIn. So, but again, thank you guys for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
So glad to have you. Thank you, Danielle. Michelle?
Yeah, and I'll echo the same thing. I think this was a fantastic panel. I know I learned some things from Issa and Danielle as well, and very impressed with all the questions and things. For myself, NILnetwork.com is a website, and our Instagram is NIL Network, and really just trying to share, you know, the industry trends, statistics, different quotes from like leaders in the space, and just trying to get a wrap on everything that's happening because this is such a quickly evolving industry. Every week it seems like, you know, there's something new to pay attention to and potentially a new direction. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Great. Well, thank you to our incredible panelists. You all were wonderful. I've learned so much. I know our audience has definitely learned so much as well. Thank you to all our attendees for coming to this WIS Presents webinar. And I want to give a special shout out to longtime WIS volunteer, Madison Savarese. You were so helpful putting this together. I really appreciate it. If you want to learn more about the work we do at WIS, you can visit womeninsportstech.org. You can join our community for free, and we'll be giving out lots more information about NIL tech and our wonderful panelists. But thank you all for being here, and have a great day.